We got one more guest and one more segment here for this week on Bang the Book Radio. That is this week's version of the Odds Report with Brent from DSI Sportsbook. Sharp money for the bowl games, sharp money for Week 17 in the NFL. Always an enlightening segment to chat with Brent. Always a lot of fun. Hopefully it helps you as much as it helps me. So here is this week's version of the Odds Report with Brent from DSI Sportsbook. All right, I'm joined by Brent, the head risk manager down at DSI Sportsbook for this week's version of the Odds Report. Brent, how's it going today, man?
Doing wonderful. Kind of weird doing this on a Thursday, not having a football game of any sort tonight. But other than that, just same old plugging away. And, as we half-heartedly joked previously about how the, suspensions and declarations for drafts and coaches and stuff like that in college football. And lo and behold, we had a whole bunch of this stuff with, linemen declaring and saying they're not going to play, running backs doing the same thing. And, of course, there was the usual suspensions with guys going out and enjoying the wacky tobacco and getting caught.
Yeah, I mean, that's the risk you take when you're out here playing the bowl games early on. And just a reminder for our listeners here, or maybe if you missed last week's segment, last week on the show, we did talk about some sharp action. We're going to talk about some new sharp action for the bowl games here this week. But Buffalo -5, Washington -3, Florida State +5, and Georgia State +7.5 were the early sharp games that we looked at here for the bowl season. And Brent, something I do want to touch on here real quickly for our listeners is that next week, we've got games Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and the following Monday as well. Limits will increase here with game week now finally arriving. So we're going to start to see some waves of activity in the market.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, guys are kind of holding back sometimes, looking for, to go heavy on a certain number. And you kind of use, the time now in terms of, for us, you get a really good idea, at least in terms of where your public count is going to go. But obviously the sharps are still going to play even at, lower limits, as we talked about the 4 games you mentioned at the top of the show. I mean, those have moved, a 1.5, I guess, on Buffalo. Florida State's moved a full point, and Georgia State, of course, from the 7.5 down to 7. So they've really found their home, early, which is good for us. But still, yeah, I mean, game day, you just get a flood, of public money in the market as well, which is, again, is quite nice for us. The way they stage these games as well. I mean, if you look at, say, like, on Friday, for example, the 27th, you've got like 11 o'clock games, 2 o'clock games, 5:45, 7 o'clock, 9:15, depending on your area code. So, they space these games out real nice in terms of people being able to load up on a game and then reload on the next one. So for us, it's just, the volume on these games makes it a whole lot easier for us to balance action.
Speaking of volume, I guess I'll ask you about that quickly here. In terms of the handle, I mean, do these kind of mirror like a low-end NFL game type thing? Is that about what you're looking at?
Yeah, depending on the game. But yeah, you can get some these games will match the lower end games, but you also, I mean, there's also games, obviously, I mean, the big games, like talking the Oklahoma and LSU, obviously Clemson, Ohio State, those are just massive handle games for us. They're equivalent of like a Sunday night, Monday night NFL game.
All right, so we take a look here at some new sharp action in the marketplace. We've got a couple of games coming up here on Saturday, then some games coming up further down the line here in the bowl season. We start with game 209, 210 here, Liberty and Georgia Southern. This one is the Cure Bowl, and this one's had some pretty one-way line movement on it so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Liberty is one of those kind of sneaky teams, if you will, that, as a public bettor, you're probably not paying a whole lot of attention to, and you probably didn't all season long. And then you wake up one day and see that they're 7-5 going into this game. They are a team that the Sharps identified a couple times through the season as a sharp play. They started out, I think it was like 0-2 and won like 5 in a row, and kind of people, maybe got, a whiff of attention on them. But here, even in the bowl game, there are getting action from sharp money at plus 5.5 is where that came in. My wager count overall just slightly favors Liberty, so I mean, I am getting a bit of action both ways on that. They beat Buffalo. Is not a decent name, I guess it will. They played Virginia, just kind of get a gauge on them. The problem we talked about earlier is, like, on the last week's show, is a lot of these bowl games you kind of have to treat them as exhibition games, just because you're talking about teams who generally don't play each other. You're talking about the extended weeks off that they have before games and stuff like that. You've got letdown things, and you've got teams that are playing up. Now, I'm not suggest that Georgia Southern's going to have a letdown against Liberty, but for Liberty itself, is the team itself is probably a game that they're definitely going to get out for. So you get the emotional factors involved as well. But it's interesting. We talked about before that the conference style of play really dictates a lot of these teams in terms of statistics. So it's really difficult to handicap these games, which where, I love the fact that sharp guys get involved as many games as possible, because it really gives us a clue, because, we're kind of behind the 8 ball as well.
Yeah, I mean, Liberty played an awful schedule. In fact, they needed all 7 of those wins because they had 2 wins over FCS opponents. Only 1 FCS win counts towards bowl eligibility. So Liberty did play one of the weakest schedules in the nation. What about the total here on this one, Brent? Up from 56.5 to 58.5. We are seeing a 59 out there as well. Seems like nothing sharp in house, but maybe somewhere else.
Yeah, well, right here, I mean, personally, from what I've seen, it's all public money. I do have a wager count about 5-1 favoring the over. So that's a real strong, wager count towards the over, especially when you're considering, these 2 teams, Liberty and Georgia Southern. It's not, a game that public's going to typically get heavily involved in. But at least public-wise, from what I see, this move is all public so far. It's just like I said, it's very, very one-sided towards the over.
All right, so we move to the next game on the board here. It's game 211, 212, the Boca Raton Bowl between SMU and Florida Atlantic. SMU 3-point favorite. There are a couple of 3.5s out there. Total dropping like a rock on this game now as well. But what's the sharp money that you've seen so far?
Yeah, I saw sharp money come in on this one on SMU. That was at -3. So this number is kind of, slightly ticking up. I also do have a heavy wager count favoring SMU as well. And it could be, you get involved in terms of like your conferences and stuff like that with SMU and the teams they've played, and Florida Atlantic looking at who they've played as well. So you kind of get just to read people looking at conference strength and saying, wow, this team, 10-2, the other team's 10-3, but this team plays in a much better conference. Wow, they must be the much better team. SMU, I think they started like 8-0. They had a really great start to the season. They've played, they played a couple of decent teams, Memphis. I think they lost to Memphis and also lost to Navy as well. And Navy's a very strong team this year. So SMU probably has a, much stronger competition. Sharps did identify them as the play at -3. I'm sitting at 3.5 myself. I see some other books that are like 3 -120. There's also like some 3.5 dog 15s out there. So I've got, one-way action pretty much in terms of the Sharps, and the public as well going the same way.
Well, and if you look at this game, again, I mentioned the total kind of cratering a little bit here. Wind very much expected for this game. Gusts in the 30-mile-per-hour range. Could be some rain as well. Sustained winds up in the 20-mile-per-hour range. And again, like we talked about before, I mean, a lot of these bowl games, in warmer weather destinations, but you still have to factor in the weather and in particular wind. And it looks like the betting market doing that here on the total.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't get bet on the under by any sharp money myself. I do have a wager count about 2-1 favoring the over. So that kind of indicates when I've got a wager count towards the over and I see a number dropping, that it probably got hit by sharp money elsewhere. It just didn't happen here. You're bang on as well, Adam, in terms of the fact that wind really is much more of a factor in terms of affecting totals than, even rain or even snow to some degree. I think wind is probably the number one factor that sharp guys look for in terms of identifying value on unders.
And the interesting thing here too is that, maybe this is kind of keeping this line in place a little bit, this weather forecast, because SMU, very proficient passing game. Again, you mentioned sharp money on SMU, heavy public count on SMU. I'm surprised we're not at 4 or 4.5 here, but again, maybe that weather forecast kind of keeping some people either off of this game or maybe starting to nibble on the FAU side.
Yeah, I if I had an inclination where this one is going to go, I think it's probably going to go up to 3.5 across the board. I got there early simply because I got the indication from the sharp money, and I have the public going the same way. So, worst case scenario, if the number drops back down to 3 and I get a sharp bet of plus 3.5, I'll be fine with that.
All right, so we take a big leap forward here to December 30th, New Year's Eve, I guess we could call it. Game 249, 250, Illinois and Cal in the Redbox Bowl. An interesting name for that one. Interesting sponsor, of course, for that bowl game. Cal up from 4.5 to 6.5, pretty much market wide with extra juice at several of those places. That would suggest Cal sharp money, right?
Well, I would suggest that, yeah. I mean, you kind of have to look at things, and it's nice being behind the counter where we're sitting in terms of looking at the the line movement and where it kind of hits a limit and what's driving that. You see that a lot of times in NFL. A number will get driven up, from say 2.5 to 3, and as soon as it hits a key number 3, boom, it gets bet down right away. This number did get bet up slowly kind of a slow trickle up to the 6.5 and touch 7. As soon as it touched 7, I actually got sharp money on Illinois. We talked about again how the complexity of handicapping bowl games is. I mean, Illinois sitting at 6-6 and Cal at 7-5, but the Big Ten probably a little stronger conference than the Pac-12. You might want to say that. Cal in terms of who they lost to, Oregon, Utah, USC. Some decent teams that they lost to. They didn't actually beat any decent teams, whereas Illinois, they did beat Wisconsin. They beat Michigan State. That's probably not what it used to be, that win, but they played such a tough schedule against teams like Minnesota, Michigan, Iowa, stuff like that. So a lot of that factors in terms of not only just the conference play, but how they did against those teams. And I guess it's just kind of a judgment call, I guess, by the Sharps. That Illinois obviously is the right side on this one. I'm kind of interested to see where this one goes because my count is pretty much even on this one, even though the number trickled up. I didn't have a problem getting Illinois money back, but it was definitely a sharp indication at +7.
Well, again, we always talk about that, from a risk management standpoint on your end, you kind of keep going, you keep going until you either find a resistance point or actually get hit at that resistance point. And I guess that's just the way this one's set up for you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, you're looking at, in terms of like the philosophy of bookmaking and stuff like that, the best number you put up there, a lot of people say, this is one that balances actions, but really the best number is the one that encourages action on both sides. You don't want your number to be so good that no one's betting a number, right? So, I mean, in college football, we're not too concerned about key numbers and the fact that this number, I didn't really take any, serious money on this one until it got to like 6 and 6.5, and of course the money back on 7. So the low number is really, I didn't get, affected on at all. But yeah, like encouraging action, even though you have to bump up from say 6 to 6.5 to 7 and get money back the other way. As long as you're getting numbers that encourage action, you're pretty okay with it, especially in bowl season.
All right, so we move to the last day of 2019 here, December 31st, game 291, 292 on the board is the Belk Bowl between Kentucky and Virginia Tech. This one's hovering right around that key number 3, Brent.
Yeah, I mean, everyone right now actually is down at 2.5. I'm 2.5. I know there are some 2.5 minus 15s on Virginia Tech, but at +3, sharp money came in on Kentucky. So Kentucky +3 is sharp money there. Good for me as well, I guess, is that I've got a wager count about 4-1 favoring Virginia Tech. So I actually still have more money on Virginia Tech. Yet I've got sharp indication on Kentucky +3. The whole market is down to 2.5. So I guess I was, felt elsewhere, not just here. What you would look for in terms of a sharp public split on this game. Both these teams in terms of, handicapping, looking at, strength of schedule and competition. I mean, VTech, I think, was 8-4, Kentucky 7-5, but they both play strong teams like Florida and Georgia on the Kentucky side. VTech, of course, Virginia with the game that they lost, and they played Notre Dame as well. Last week we talked about as well, one of the things that I know just from my experience, like, I'm not a handicapper per se. I do have a clue as to what's going on the field as well. But, rushing teams in bowl seasons, this is something that's been, tried and true over the years. And Kentucky, one of the stronger rushing teams this season. I guess is their quarterback, Bowden Jr., who's just like, rushes for a ton. He even went for like almost 100 yards, I think it was, against Georgia. So, because of the preparation and stuff like that, and the the delays you have between these games and stuff like that, generally in terms of getting a game plan and putting things together, you've got a lot of time, but you're talking about teams that you haven't really faced before. And so the one thing that really kind of rings true, the most consistent and easiest thing to replicate over and over is a rushing attack, and that definitely favors Kentucky in this one.
Now, we talked about buy points with that last game there between Illinois and Cal. And if you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, well, my buy point on Kentucky is 3. If it gets back to 3, I'll take it. Does this one get back to 3?
I don't think so. No, like I said, I do have a wager count, as I mentioned, that favors VTech. But just, as of right now, there's just no reason to go back to 3. I mean, I'm perfectly fine sitting at 2.5. And if I got to, stand strong there and hope for Kentucky and the Sharps to be right in this game, I'll gladly do that.
Now, we did mention last week the semifinals. The reason we don't really mention them too much in detail this week is that there's really not much to report. Ohio State came back down a little bit off 2.5. Oklahoma got to 14, came back down at most places after those suspensions were announced as opposed to just the rumors. So we will update that next week, obviously, as we're much closer to the college football playoff semifinals. Now we flip gears over to the NFL side of things, Brent. We start with game 451, 452, some Saturday night football in the NFC West. The Rams and the 49ers Looks like so far the 49ers are the preferred side. You're seeing sharp action on the total, though.
Yeah, I got sharp money on the under this one. Under 46.5 is where that coming. It's come down quite a bit now to 44.5. There's a lot have been made, I guess, about Goff and his road starts and stuff like that. I think is the team in terms of the one loss are actually not bad on the road this year. But there's kind of that reputation that Goff has being on the road that he struggles. And San Francisco, again, I'm not going to try and get into the minds of the sharp money too much. But you look at San Francisco, they are kind of a team that kind of is dedicated to running the ball first, and you also on the flip side of that, you've got the Rams defense, who as much has been made, I think, of Jalen Ramsey, and since he went over there to the Rams, their defense has been probably like top 3 in the league. So some of the, when you're looking at season-long data in terms of analyzing how a team's doing, you have to also break it down in points and say, okay, what happened at this point? The quarterback went out, there was a change, or there's a key acquisition on defense and stuff like that. So numbers can definitely get skewed when you look at season-long numbers versus numbers after a significant change. And I think Jalen Ramsey qualifies as that one. So that could be part of why this number is going down. All I know is that the sharp money is on the under 46.5. My wager count on the total is pretty much dead even on this one. Looking at the side, my count's about 3-1 favoring San Francisco. So I think 6.5 is going to be a number that works for us. So there's still a lot of respect for the Rams, and they'll be able to stay in this game for sure.
Speaking of 6.5, no sharp action to report on this game, but I do want to ask you about it real quickly here. 453, 454 is Buffalo and New England. Can you remember a time where Buffalo was the public side against New England? Because that's how this one's setting up.
Yeah, it's really a strange one. I do have a wager count, favoring Buffalo about 2-1. We talk, we kind of make fun of the fact that we almost never need New England to win a football game, but this is a case where we actually might need them on Sunday, and we'll see how they do for us. But yeah, it is, it's certainly strange to be getting all this money on Buffalo. But Buffalo, their defense is so strong, their offense is solid, their quarterback plays well. And New England, it's funny because there's a lot of narratives and kind of themes out there, and you're looking at New England right now. You look at the injuries they had and stuff like that. A lot of it has been made about Brady and how he's quote unquote struggling and stuff like that. So you have to kind of read into some of that kind of stuff, and sometimes it gets overblown in terms of narratives and themes.
This could be an ugly one for you guys because I think you're going to have a lot of New England teaser money and then a lot of Bills plus the points money. You're going to be hoping, I think, at this one kind of comes in a spot where New England wins big.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, you could take probably almost every game, and anytime there's a blowout is good for us in NFL, simply because the teasers that it breaks up, whether you're crushing the total by 20 points or a side by 14 points or whatever. Generally speaking, those always work out well for us. I think you talked about teasers. I think New England will be a good a side we're going to need in terms of a popular teaser side. The Rams as well, sitting at 6.5, will be popular. Denver against Detroit at home, and the Chargers as well. I think it would be some big teaser outlooks for us.
Indianapolis too. I think Carolina's going with Will Grier this week, so that could be another one that winds up on the teaser card here. In any event, getting back to sharp action, 455, 456 is Houston and Tampa Bay. Early game here on Saturday. What's the story with this one?
Yeah, I mean, really the story in this one is injury information on the Tampa Bay side of the ball. I mean, I kind of, didn't want to mention this game just because the injuries are really what drove this number. And the number's pretty much shot at the under 52.5 is where that came in. Now, a lot of, the opening number, the fact that, Evans wasn't going to play, Miller's not going to play for Tampa Bay as well. Winston's banged up. Godwin, I don't think they've actually ruled Godwin out yet, but there's just no way. I don't think he's going to play this weekend either. So, Tampa Bay is really going to be hurt on offense side of the ball, and I think that's pretty much what's driving this number towards the under. Now, interestingly enough, it's funny, like you kind of expect the public to kind of overreact to stuff like this as well, but I've got a wager count still favoring the over of about 4-1. So I'm kind of in a good spot that I took money towards the over, and this number's dropped down to sharp money that moved it.
I mean, does the public, and I don't, this is going to come off bad because, I mean, obviously we've got a wide range.
I'm glad you're going to say it, not me.
Well, I mean, does the public just not care, or do they just not pay attention, or what do you think it is?
I think it's just easy to kind of fall in love with stories. And I mean, Houston's defense has been questionable this year. They're capable offensively of putting up a whole lot of points. And you kind of figure like if as long as Winston's there, Tampa Bay should be able to put up points as well. And Tampa Bay's defense on their front seven might be strong, but defensive back's not. So I don't know. I think you kind of it's tough sometimes for people to, go towards the unders. We talked about it before, and you kind of, when you're betting unders, you're kind of hoping for something to not happen. Like you don't want teams to score, which is kind of like, it's not a whole lot of fun to cheer for. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's like they say, it's not under until it's over. So, that's not really a fun thing to be rooting for here, especially in an early game on Saturday that has the potential for some fireworks. We move over to Sunday, game 459, 460 out on the left coast. Oakland and the Chargers, pretty one-sided activity in this game, it appears.
I think there was a time when Oakland was thought of to be a decent team and was getting a whole lot of respect, but that they went on I guess it was a 3-game win streak there, and everyone was talking about how they kind of figured stuff out. And then you look back and like, well, those 3 teams they beat were Detroit. They did actually beat the Chargers here and Cincinnati. So now they've since gone, and I guess ever since they lost to the Jets, kind of it's been, public has been going, got off them right quick after that loss to the Jets. And of course, then they got crushed by Kansas City, and it's all downhill since then. I mean, the last game last week, you figure, if they were ever going to be like an emotional high, if a team was going to be quote unquote up for a game. Now, again, they're professionals. They're supposed to be up for every game. I mean, that game last week at home to Jacksonville was kind of the spot where, look, you really got to win this game, with the last game, in Oakland in the Coliseum. And of course, they laid an egg, blew up that game that they were leading. So, perhaps no surprise that I got sharp money here on the Chargers. They came in at -5.5, and we're sitting at 7 right now. So it's kind of, we're probably kind of have to dig our heels in at -7 and use juice if we have to. At 7, I'm kind of getting a little bit money back the other way. So 7 seems to be working for me. But below that, pardon me, was all Chargers money, most of it sharp. So 7 seems to be working. I'm starting to get a little bit back, just dribbles back on Oakland. So I think that number is going to work for me. Game time, maybe I'll end up being, $7.15 or something like that. But once I landed on 7, I don't think I'm going to be able to go back. Also, of course, with the Raiders on the injury front, Jacobs has been ruled out already. I mean, he's been kind of like questionable or whatever for the past few weeks. This week, he's finally, they ruled him out early that he's out. I think on their offensive line, they've got 4 guys who are likely going to be missing. So just a mess up on the offensive side of the ball for the Raiders.
Not a game that you sent over here because there must be no sharp action in-house, but it appears that there may be sharp action somewhere. This Dallas and Philadelphia game, 475, 476, really fascinating. We've talked a lot about this game here this week where the public looks to be on Dallas. The sharp money looks to be on Philadelphia. Total also coming down here in this one. But what do you sort of make of what's happening with the movement in the market for that game?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I've seen so far has been the questionable status of Prescott. I mean, it looks like he's going to play, but there really wasn't any move or any change on the number at all. From what I've seen so far, the count towards the under is just public money that I got so far coming in. My wager count does favor Dallas, though. I've got a wager count about 2, almost bordering on 3-1, favoring the Cowboys. But I think people are just kind of holding off on the Prescott news. But I the indications are that he's going to play, but I just kind of expected maybe this number to tick down a bit more. It hasn't really done that, and it's kind of held at 1.5. Other than that, I'm sitting at 46 on the total. I know I think there's like 46.5 out there. There's also 45.5. So the market really seems to be split on this one in terms of the side, but across the board, it's sitting at 1.5 on the Cowboys.
Well, one where we do have sharp action here is Sunday Night Football, and this will be the last game that we have here on this segment. Game 479, 480, Kansas City and Chicago. And Brent, sorry to say, this feels like a pretty bad spot for you here so far.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas City is one of those teams that we almost, just recent years, of course, with Mahomes and such, that we pretty much never need them. Now I got sharp money on Kansas City -5.5 or -5. This one's up to 6 across the board. So I'm finally, at 6. just kind of gone with the market there. But sharp money came in, like I said, at the -5. Even at 6, my weighted count's about 5-1 favoring Kansas City. So, I don't know. If anyone touches 6.5, I'm going to be there right with them. I just have a feeling this number is going to go that way. Kansas City sitting at 10-4, and of course Chicago's 7-7 on the year. They kind of have their season lost to them. The one thing with Kansas City is, I'm not going to say their running backs are a mess, because they've got like 4 of them who kind of rotate in and out, but they don't really have like a strong lead back per se. Defensively, you kind of maybe hope that the Bears can move the ball offensively and take advantage of Kansas City's defense a bit. But yeah, I don't know, this number, in terms of the total, opened up at 45, has ticked down to 44.5. So no substantial move on the total at all, just a side one way favoring Kansas City. So, I have a feeling that I'm probably going to have to get to 6.5. Fortunately for me, most of the money that I did take was at, it has been at 6. So, I really don't have a risk too much of being middle at 6, whatever. If I go to 6.5, it might land at 6 or something like that. But just looking at my numbers in house, where the numbers come from and where it's, my action since it's gone at 6, my feeling is I'm going to have to tick up to 6.5 before game time.
Well, again, we look for market indicators, and that is one thing that kind of stands out a little bit here, is that even the books that really don't embrace a whole lot of risk, really, fall in line with what the public wants to bet, even they're not at 6.5 yet. So is there maybe a chance of Chicago sharp money if this thing gets high enough?
Well, I think, part of it has to do with how much time we have before kickoff. I have seen some 6 -15s out there. So I know the kind of trend is going that way as well. So like I said, I just think, I might lead the pack and go 6.5. I don't know, but we just have so much time. I don't want to jump the gun.
Well, and this will be another game that's a popular teaser candidate on the favorites. So we'll see what happens here with this Sunday Night Football game with the Chiefs and the Bears. Brent, the head risk manager down at DSI Sportsbook, always appreciate your segments. Thank you so much for joining me, man. Feliz Navidad to you and yours, and stay safe out there, man.
Awesome, Adam. I appreciate you having me on. Have a great Christmas, and we'll talk to you soon.